No entrees ever left the kitchen that night, yet hundreds of guests were waiting for food that never arrived. Behind the chaos, hidden tunnels, missing tickets, and a buried secret began to surface. What started as a dinner service disaster turned into a shocking conspiracy that changed everything forever. Welcome to Dark Lantern Stories. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, your city, your country, and the current time in your location. If you enjoy suspenseful stories like this one, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Now turn down the lights and enjoy tonight's story. The restaurant stood at the corner of a busy street where people hurried past every day without giving much thought to what happened behind its shining glass windows. During the daytime, it looked ordinary. At night, it became something else entirely. The warm lights reflected across the pavement. The smell of food drifted through the air. Customers arrived dressed for special occasions, family dinners, and business meetings. From the outside, everything appeared perfect. Inside, however, something was beginning to go terribly wrong. On a cool evening in late autumn, the staff arrived for what they expected to be another busy dinner service. The restaurant was called the Copper Room. It had earned a reputation for excellent food and friendly service. Reservations had been booked for weeks. People traveled from nearby towns just to eat there. The owner, Martin Hale, was proud of what he had built. He often walked through the dining room before opening, smiling at the neatly arranged tables and polished glasses. He believed success came from discipline and hard work. What he did not know was that this night would become the most talked about night in the history of his restaurant. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the kitchen staff gathered for their briefing. Head chef Victor Stone stood at the center of the room. He was respected for his talent, but feared for his temper. Everyone listened carefully when he spoke. His eyes moved across the team. "Tonight will be busy," he said. "Every station must stay focused. No mistakes." The cooks nodded. Among them was a young chef named Ethan Brooks. Ethan had joined the restaurant only 6 months earlier. He was eager to learn and dreamed of becoming a head chef someday. Unlike many others, he paid attention to every detail. He noticed things people overlooked. That habit would soon place him at the center of a mystery nobody expected. As the meeting ended, Ethan walked toward the storage area to collect ingredients. While checking inventory, he noticed something strange. Several boxes that should have contained fresh vegetables were missing. At first, he assumed they had been moved. He searched every shelf but found nothing. He mentioned it to another cook named Sarah. She frowned and said she had noticed missing items the previous week as well. They reported the issue to the kitchen manager, who dismissed it as a simple inventory mistake. Ethan tried to forget about it. After all, dinner service would begin soon. By 6 o'clock, the restaurant was full. The dining room buzzed with conversation. Waiters moved quickly between tables. Orders began arriving in the kitchen. Normally, this was when the team entered a rhythm. Tonight, however, confusion appeared almost immediately. A waiter rushed into the kitchen looking worried. "Table 7 has been waiting 20 minutes, he said. Victor checked the order board. The ticket was there. The ingredients were prepared. Yet nobody could explain why the entree had not been cooked. Another waiter arrived with the same complaint from a different table. Then another. Soon the kitchen was flooded with unanswered questions. Orders were being entered into the system, but somehow disappearing before reaching the cooking stations. Victor's face darkened. He demanded answers, but none came. The staff worked faster. More tickets arrived. More customers waited. Still no entrees left the kitchen. In the dining room, patience began to wear thin. Customers checked their watches. Some complained quietly. Others called waiters to their tables. Martin noticed the growing tension and stepped in to calm people down. He offered complimentary drinks and promised food would arrive shortly. Secretly, he was becoming nervous. The Copper Room had never experienced anything like this. Back in the kitchen, Ethan examined the order system. Everything appeared normal, yet whenever a ticket was printed, it vanished moments later. It was as if someone were removing them on purpose. He shared his suspicion with Sarah. She looked around carefully before answering. "What if someone is sabotaging the restaurant?" she whispered. Ethan laughed nervously. The idea sounded ridiculous. Still, he could not ignore the feeling growing in his stomach. Something was wrong. Very wrong. As the evening continued, the situation worsened. Nearly every table was waiting for food. The kitchen stations stood ready. Ingredients were prepared. The cooks were desperate to work, yet somehow the orders never reached them. Victor shouted instructions. Managers ran between rooms. Waiters apologized repeatedly. The atmosphere became chaotic. Then something happened that stopped everyone cold. A waiter entered the kitchen carrying a printed ticket. "This was under a customer's chair," he said. The staff stared at him. The ticket should have been hanging above the cooking station. Instead, it had appeared in the dining room. Victor grabbed it and examined it. It was genuine. Someone had removed it from the system and hidden it. The discovery changed everything. This was no technical failure. Someone was interfering with the restaurant. The question was who? Martin immediately ordered a review of security footage. Unfortunately, the camera system had failed earlier that afternoon. Nobody knew why. The timing seemed impossible to ignore. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Missing ingredients, disappearing tickets, broken cameras, none of it seemed accidental anymore. The restaurant remained open because closing would create an even greater disaster. Staff pushed forward despite the confusion. Some dishes finally reached customers. Most did not. Hours passed. The frustration in the dining room grew stronger. Several guests left without eating. Others demanded refunds. The reputation of the copper room was collapsing in real time. Around 9 o'clock, Ethan went into the basement storage area, searching for additional supplies. The basement was rarely used except for overflow inventory. A narrow staircase led downward into darkness. He switched on a light and began looking through shelves. Everything seemed normal until he heard a sound. It was faint, a scraping noise. He froze. The basement should have been empty. Slowly, he followed the sound toward the far corner of the room. There, he discovered something unexpected. One of the storage shelves had been moved slightly away from the wall. Behind it was a narrow opening. Ethan stared in disbelief. He had worked there for months and never noticed it before. Curiosity overcame caution. He squeezed through the opening and found himself in a hidden passageway. Dust covered the floor. The air smelled old and damp. His heartbeat quickened. Why would a restaurant have a hidden passage? He walked deeper into the darkness. The passage eventually opened into a small room. Inside were stacks of missing inventory boxes, vegetables, meat, spices. Everything that had vanished over recent weeks was there. But that was not the most shocking discovery. On a table near the wall sat hundreds of missing order tickets. Ethan stepped closer. Someone had been collecting them. Every vanished ticket from that evening was stacked neatly in piles. His mind raced. Who would do this? And why? Suddenly he heard footsteps behind him. He turned sharply. The narrow passage was empty. Then another sound echoed through the room. A door creaked somewhere beyond the darkness. Ethan realized the hidden room was larger than he first believed. Someone else was down there. He wanted to leave immediately. Instead, he moved toward the sound. Fear mixed with curiosity. The room opened into another corridor. At the end stood a wooden door. Light glowed beneath it. Voices drifted through the crack. Ethan approached carefully. He could not make out every word, but he heard enough to understand something alarming. The voices were discussing the restaurant's failure. They sounded pleased. One person laughed. Another mentioned that tonight was only the beginning. Ethan's blood ran cold. This was a planned operation. Someone wanted the copper room destroyed. Before he could hear more, the floorboard beneath his foot creaked loudly. Silence followed. Every voice stopped. Ethan backed away. The door opened. A shadow appeared. He turned and ran. His footsteps echoed through the hidden corridor. Behind him he heard another set of footsteps moving quickly. Whoever was there had heard him. Panic surged through his body. He raced toward the passage entrance. The darkness seemed endless. Every second felt longer than the last. At any moment he expected a hand to grab his shoulder. Somehow he reached the storage room and pushed the shelf aside. He stumbled back into the basement. The footsteps behind him stopped. Whoever had chased him did not follow. Breathing heavily, Ethan returned upstairs. The restaurant remained in chaos. Nobody noticed his pale face. Sarah approached and asked where he had been. Ethan looked around carefully before answering. "I found something," he whispered, "and I think someone is trying to destroy this restaurant from the inside." Sarah's eyes widened. Before she could respond, the lights throughout the building suddenly went out. The dining room erupted with confused voices. The kitchen fell silent. In the darkness, a single scream echoed from somewhere near the front entrance. Then came the sound of shattered glass. Nobody knew what had happened. Nobody knew who screamed. But one thing had become clear. The disaster affecting the copper room was far worse than anyone imagined, and before the night was over, a secret hidden for years would finally begin to emerge. The darkness lasted only a few seconds, but for everyone inside the copper room it felt much longer. Customers froze in confusion. Glasses rattled as people shifted nervously in their seats. Somewhere near the entrance, a woman cried out in fear. Then emergency lights flickered on, casting the restaurant in a dim red glow. The atmosphere changed instantly. The warm and welcoming dining room now looked strange and unsettling. Shadows stretched across the walls. Faces appeared pale. Conversations became whispers. Martin pushed through the crowd toward the front entrance. Several employees followed closely behind him. The shattered glass sound had come from that direction. When they arrived, they found the front door intact. Nothing seemed broken, yet one of the large, decorative mirrors hanging near the reception desk had fallen and shattered across the floor. Guests stood nearby, staring at the broken pieces. No one could explain why it had fallen. Martin ordered staff to clear the area immediately. Meanwhile, Ethan remained near the kitchen entrance, his thoughts racing. The hidden room, the stolen inventory, the stacks of missing tickets, the voices discussing the restaurant's destruction. None of it made sense. Sarah approached him again. "Tell me everything," she whispered. Ethan quickly described what he had discovered beneath the restaurant. As he spoke, Sarah's expression changed from curiosity to disbelief. When he finished, she looked around nervously. "We need to tell Martin." Ethan nodded. Together they found the owner speaking with frustrated customers. Martin listened carefully as Ethan explained everything. At first the owner looked skeptical. Then Ethan described the hidden passage and the stolen supplies in detail. Martin's face slowly lost color. "That passage shouldn't exist," he said quietly. "At least not according to the building plans." Ethan stared at him. "What do you mean?" Martin hesitated before answering. "This building is very old, more than 100 years old. Before it became a restaurant, it was several different businesses. There have always been rumors about hidden spaces beneath it, but nobody ever found proof." The realization sent a chill through Ethan. The hidden passage had not appeared recently. It had existed for years, maybe decades. Martin immediately gathered several trusted employees. Armed with flashlights, they descended into the basement. The restaurant above remained open only because closing immediately would create panic. Victor reluctantly stayed upstairs to manage what little service remained. Downstairs, Ethan led the group to the shifted shelf. Martin's eyes widened when he saw the opening. "I don't believe this," he murmured. They entered one by one. The hidden room looked exactly as Ethan had left it. Stolen ingredients filled every corner. Missing order tickets remained stacked neatly on the table. Martin picked up several tickets and examined them. Every one belonged to that evening's dinner service. Someone had deliberately prevented the kitchen from receiving orders. "Who would do this?" Sarah asked. No one answered. Then one of the employees noticed something unusual. There were fresh footprints in the dust leading toward the deeper corridor. The same corridor Ethan had followed earlier. Martin raised his flashlight. "Let's see where this goes." The group moved cautiously through the narrow passage. The air grew colder as they advanced. Dust covered the walls. Wooden beams creaked overhead. It felt less like part of a restaurant and more like an abandoned tunnel, forgotten by time. Eventually, they reached the wooden door Ethan had seen before. It stood slightly open. Light no longer glowed beneath it. Martin pushed the door wider. The room beyond was empty. Several chairs surrounded a wooden table. Papers were scattered everywhere. Someone had left in a hurry. Ethan examined the documents. Most appeared to be financial records. Others contained newspaper clippings about the copper room. One clipping caught his attention immediately. The headline read, "Historic Restaurant Purchased by Local Businessman." It referred to Martin's purchase of the building several years earlier. More clippings followed. Some praised the restaurant's success. Others discussed plans for future expansion. Someone had been monitoring the business for a very long time. Then Sarah found something even stranger. A photograph hidden beneath the table. The image showed the building decades earlier. Standing in front was a man who looked remarkably similar to Martin. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Martin stared at the photograph in silence. "Who is he?" Ethan asked. Martin swallowed hard. "My grandfather." Everyone looked at him. Martin continued. "He owned this property many years ago. I never met him. My family rarely spoke about him." Ethan studied the photograph again. Suddenly the mystery seemed larger than simple sabotage. This was personal. Someone connected to the building's history was involved. Before anyone could discuss further, a loud crash echoed through the tunnel. Everyone jumped. The sound had come from somewhere behind them. Martin ordered the group back toward the main passage. They moved quickly, flashlights shaking in nervous hands. When they reached the hidden room, they discovered that several inventory boxes had been knocked over. Yet nobody else was visible. The footprints in the dust now led away from the room toward another section of tunnel previously unnoticed. Ethan shined his flashlight in that direction. The passage disappeared into darkness. "Someone is still down here," he said. The group followed the fresh tracks. The tunnel twisted beneath the building like a maze. Eventually they arrived at an old metal door. Unlike everything else, this door appeared newer. Someone had maintained it. A heavy lock hung from the handle. Martin examined it closely. This wasn't here before. One employee produced a tool from his pocket. After several minutes of effort, the lock finally broke. The metal door creaked open. What they found beyond shocked everyone. The room contained dozens of filing cabinets. Shelves lined the walls. Boxes filled with documents stretched from floor to ceiling. It looked like a secret archive. Ethan opened the nearest cabinet. Inside were records dating back many decades. Property deeds, legal disputes, personal letters, financial statements. The history of the building had been preserved in extraordinary detail. Sarah discovered a folder labeled with Martin's family name. She handed it to him. Martin opened it carefully. His eyes widened as he read. "This can't be right." Ethan stepped closer. "What is it?" Martin slowly turned the pages. The documents revealed a bitter legal battle between his grandfather and another business partner. According to the records, the partner claimed ownership of the property, but lost in court. Shortly afterward, he disappeared. No one knew where he went. Ethan frowned. Maybe his family never forgot. Martin nodded grimly. It was a possibility. Yet the deeper they searched, the stranger the story became. Hidden among the documents was a diary. Its pages had yellowed with age. The handwriting was difficult to read, but several entries stood out. One described secret meetings beneath the building. Another mentioned hidden tunnels connecting nearby properties. The final entries became increasingly paranoid. The writer believed someone was watching him. Then the diary ended abruptly. No explanation, no conclusion, just silence. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Suddenly a faint noise echoed through the archive room. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Everyone turned toward the doorway. A figure stood there. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Then the figure ran. Ethan reacted instantly. He chased after the stranger into the tunnel. The others followed close behind. The pursuit wound through dark corridors and narrow passages. The figure moved surprisingly fast. Several times, Ethan nearly lost sight of them. Finally, the stranger emerged into an abandoned section of basement beneath a neighboring building. The area looked unused for years. Broken furniture covered the floor. Dust filled the air. Ethan rounded a corner and found the figure trapped against a wall. The stranger pulled down a hood. Everyone froze. It was not an elderly enemy seeking revenge. It was not a mysterious outsider. It was someone they all recognized. The restaurant's accountant, Daniel Mercer. Martin stared at him in disbelief. Daniel! Daniel's shoulders slumped. His expression revealed exhaustion more than fear. "You weren't supposed to find the tunnels," he said quietly. Martin stepped forward. "What is going on?" Daniel laughed bitterly. The truth is bigger than you think." Ethan demanded answers. Daniel looked around the room before speaking. "I wasn't working alone." The statement hung heavily in the air. Martin's face hardened. "Who else?" Daniel hesitated. Then he revealed a name that stunned everyone. Victor Stone, the head chef. Sarah gasped. Ethan shook his head immediately. "That's impossible." But Daniel continued. He explained that Victor had discovered the hidden tunnels months earlier during renovation work. Together they had explored the underground network. In one of the hidden rooms, they found old documents suggesting that valuable land beneath the district would soon be purchased for a massive redevelopment project. If the copper room failed financially, investors could acquire the property at a fraction of its value. Victor believed he could become wealthy by helping certain developers obtain the building. The sabotage had been planned carefully. Missing inventory, broken cameras, disappearing tickets. Every incident was designed to damage the restaurant's reputation. Martin listened in stunned silence. Years of hard work had been targeted for profit, yet something still did not fit. Ethan sensed it immediately. "If that's true," he said, "why keep all the records? Why build a secret archive?" Daniel looked away. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. "Because we found something else down here." The room fell silent. Something we didn't understand. Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken. "What did you find?" Daniel opened his mouth to answer. Before he could speak, a loud explosion echoed somewhere above them. Dust rained from the ceiling. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Everyone staggered. Another explosion followed, far away but unmistakable. Then the lights in the tunnel went out completely. In the darkness, Daniel shouted a single sentence that left everyone terrified. "Victor has started it." A moment later, the sound of rushing water echoed through the underground passages, growing louder with every passing second. The sound of rushing water grew louder every second. At first, it resembled distant rain. Then it became a roar. The darkness around them seemed alive. Ethan felt cold air rushing through the tunnels. Panic spread across the group. Martin grabbed Daniel by the arm. "What has Victor done?" Daniel struggled to answer over the growing noise. "There is an old flood control system beneath this district. It was built decades ago. Victor found maps. He believed activating it would destroy evidence and force the restaurant to close permanently." Another tremor shook the ground. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere deep within the tunnel network, metal groaned loudly. Ethan imagined ancient structures collapsing beneath the city. "We need to get out of here!" Sarah shouted. Nobody disagreed. The group began moving quickly through the darkness. Flashlights provided only small circles of light. Every corridor looked identical. Every turn increased the feeling of being trapped inside a maze. Behind them, the sound of rushing water continued to grow. It was getting closer, much closer. Daniel led the way. He knew the tunnels better than anyone else. As they hurried through the passageways, Ethan noticed several old markings painted on the walls. Arrows pointed toward different routes. Some symbols had faded with age. Others appeared newer. Victor must have marked certain paths during his exploration. The realization made Ethan uneasy. How long had the head chef been planning this? Weeks? Months? Years? Ahead, the tunnel split into two directions. Daniel hesitated. "Which way?" Martin demanded. Daniel pointed left. "This should lead back toward the restaurant." They turned and continued. The air became colder. Water now splashed somewhere behind them. Ethan risked a glance over his shoulder. His stomach tightened instantly. A wave of muddy water was racing through the tunnel. It moved faster than any of them expected. "Run!" he shouted. Everyone accelerated. Footsteps echoed wildly. Breathing became difficult. The ancient tunnel seemed endless. Water crashed against the walls as it surged forward. Several times Ethan nearly slipped. Sarah stumbled once, but Martin caught her before she fell. They pushed onward. Finally, a faint light appeared ahead. Relief spread through the group. The passage opened into the hidden room where the stolen inventory had been stored. Water was already flowing across the floor. Boxes floated past like abandoned boats. The stacks of missing order tickets were ruined. Papers dissolved into wet fragments. Whatever secrets remained there would soon disappear forever. They crossed the room and squeezed through the narrow opening behind the shelf. Moments later, they emerged into the restaurant basement. The difference was startling. Above ground, customers and staff were still dealing with the aftermath of the failed dinner service. They had no idea that a flood was racing beneath their feet. Martin immediately ordered an evacuation. Employees moved through the dining room, directing guests toward the exits. Some customers complained. Others sensed the urgency and left without argument. Within minutes, the building was nearly empty. Then another shock arrived. Police vehicles appeared outside. Apparently, several nearby businesses had reported unusual underground vibrations. Officers entered the restaurant and began questioning staff. Martin explained the situation as quickly as possible. The officers listened carefully. At first, they seemed skeptical. Then one of them received a radio message. His expression changed immediately. "Several streets away, a section of road has collapsed," he announced. "There are reports of underground flooding." The reality of the danger became impossible to ignore. Emergency crews began arriving from across the city. Meanwhile, Victor Stone was nowhere to be found. His disappearance confirmed Daniel's accusation. The head chef had vanished just before the explosions. Ethan could not stop thinking about Daniel's unfinished statement. Before the tunnel flood interrupted them, he had mentioned finding something else beneath the building, something they did not understand. Ethan approached him while police interviewed witnesses. "You never finished explaining." Daniel looked exhausted. Mud covered his clothes. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. For a moment he seemed much older than before. Finally he nodded. "Come with me." They moved away from the crowd. Martin and Sarah joined them. Daniel lowered his voice. Several months ago, Victor and I discovered a sealed chamber. It was hidden beyond the archive room. Ethan listened closely. What was inside? Daniel hesitated. At first, we thought it contained old valuables. Instead, we found evidence of something much stranger. He described a small underground office, untouched for decades. Furniture remained exactly where it had been left. Papers covered a desk. Personal belongings sat undisturbed. It looked as though the occupant had simply stepped outside and never returned. Most surprising of all, the office belonged to the business partner mentioned in the legal records, the same man who disappeared years earlier. Sarah frowned. You mean he never left? Daniel nodded slowly. That is what we began to suspect. A heavy silence followed. Ethan felt chills despite standing in a crowded room. What happened to him? Daniel looked away. We never found out, but we found his notes. According to the documents, the missing partner had become obsessed with proving corruption among several powerful businessmen. He believed they were secretly manipulating property ownership throughout the district. The hidden tunnels allowed them to meet without attracting attention. As he investigated further, he became increasingly paranoid. His final writings suggested he had uncovered something dangerous. Then the records ended. Martin rubbed his forehead. And Victor wanted to destroy all of this? Daniel nodded. The documents could affect future redevelopment deals. Some people would pay a fortune to keep them hidden. Before anyone could discuss further, a police officer approached. We found something in the kitchen, he said. You should see it. The group followed him upstairs. The restaurant looked completely different now. Emergency lights flashed through the windows. Tables stood abandoned. Half-finished meals remained untouched. The atmosphere felt eerie. They entered the kitchen. Officers surrounded one of the storage freezers. The heavy metal door stood open. Inside, attached to the wall with tape, was a large blueprint. Ethan stepped closer. The drawing showed an extensive underground tunnel network stretching beneath several city blocks. Red markings highlighted specific locations. One mark circled the copper room. Another circled an old warehouse across town. A third circled a property scheduled for redevelopment. Martin stared at the blueprint. Victor was mapping everything. One officer pointed toward handwritten notes along the edges. Several addresses appeared repeatedly. Names were listed beside them. Investors, developers, property owners. The sabotage was connected to a much larger plan. Suddenly, Sarah noticed something else. A message written across the bottom of the blueprint in thick black ink. 4 simple words. You found only half. Ethan felt a chill. The message seemed directed at them personally. Daniel looked horrified. Victor wrote that. Martin frowned. What does it mean? Nobody knew. Yet everyone sensed the same thing. The mystery was far from over. Hours passed. Emergency crews managed to control the underground flooding. Damage assessments began throughout the district. The copper room remained closed indefinitely. News reporters gathered outside. Rumors spread rapidly. Some stories claimed a criminal operation had been uncovered. Others suggested hidden treasure beneath the city. Reality was far more complicated. Near midnight, Ethan sat alone in the dark dining room, reviewing everything that had happened. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Still, his mind refused to rest. The phrase kept repeating itself. You found only half. Half of what? Half the tunnels? Half the evidence? Half the truth? Footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Sarah approached carrying a folder. You need to see this. Ethan opened it. Inside were copies of documents recovered from the archive room before the flood. Most were financial records. One page immediately caught his attention. It contained a hand-drawn map separate from the blueprint found in the freezer. Unlike the blueprint, this map highlighted only a single location, a forgotten building on the edge of the city. The note beneath it read, Final Meeting Site. Ethan looked up. Where did you get this? Sarah pointed toward Daniel. He remembered seeing it before. Victor spent weeks searching for that location. Martin soon joined them. Together they studied the map. The building had once served as a shipping warehouse decades earlier. It had been abandoned for years. Nobody paid attention to it anymore. Yet according to the note, it held significance. Perhaps even answers. "We should tell the police," Sarah said. Martin agreed immediately. Officers reviewed the map and organized a search team. Ethan expected the investigation to wait until morning. Instead, events moved quickly. A witness reported seeing Victor's vehicle heading toward the industrial district only an hour earlier. The abandoned warehouse lay in the same direction. Police prepared to leave at once. Ethan surprised everyone by insisting on joining them. Sarah volunteered as well. Martin argued against it initially. Then he changed his mind. They had become part of the mystery whether they liked it or not. Convoys of police vehicles departed shortly after midnight. Rain had begun falling outside. The city streets glistened beneath streetlights. Ethan watched buildings pass through the window as they drove. Every minute increased the tension. If Victor was truly heading toward the warehouse, what was he planning? The journey ended near the edge of the city. The warehouse appeared enormous even in darkness. Rust covered its walls. Broken windows stared outward like empty eyes. Police surrounded the property carefully. Officers moved into position. No lights were visible inside. Everything seemed silent. Too silent. Ethan stepped from the vehicle. Rain soaked his jacket immediately. He stared at the building. Something about it felt wrong. Then he noticed a faint glow through one of the upper windows. Someone was inside. Officers advanced cautiously. The massive entrance door hung partially open. Fresh tire tracks led directly into the warehouse. There was no doubt now. Victor had been there recently. The search team entered. Flashlights swept through darkness. Rows of abandoned crates stretched across the vast interior. Shadows shifted everywhere. Every sound echoed. Suddenly a voice boomed from somewhere above them. "You should have stayed in the restaurant." Everyone froze. The voice belonged to Victor Stone. They searched for its source, but saw nothing. Then a second sentence echoed through the warehouse, a sentence that made Ethan's blood run cold. "If you want the truth about what happened beneath your restaurant, come upstairs." Silence followed. Officers tightened their grip on flashlights and equipment. Ethan looked toward the upper levels of the warehouse. Somewhere above them, Victor was waiting, and judging by the confidence in his voice, he wanted them to find him. The warehouse fell silent after Victor's voice faded into the darkness. Rain tapped against broken windows high above. Water dripped from rusted beams. Every person inside the building looked upward, trying to locate the source of the voice. Police officers moved carefully between rows of crates. Their flashlights cut through the darkness like narrow blades of light. Ethan felt his heart pounding. After everything that had happened, they were finally close to the man responsible. Yet Victor did not sound frightened. He sounded confident, almost calm. That made Ethan even more nervous. The lead officer ordered everyone to proceed cautiously. 2 teams moved towards separate staircases leading to the upper level. Ethan, Sarah, Martin, and Daniel remained close together. The warehouse seemed larger on the inside than anyone expected. Every step echoed through the massive structure. Dust covered the floor. Signs of abandonment were everywhere. Yet there were also signs of recent activity. Fresh footprints crossed the dust. Electrical cables stretched along the walls. Someone had been using the building. They reached the second floor after several tense minutes. The area overlooked the warehouse floor below. Old offices lined a narrow hallway. Most doors hung open. Empty rooms contained broken desks and forgotten furniture. At the far end of the corridor, a single light glowed beneath a closed door. Everyone saw it. Nobody spoke. The officers approached slowly. The hallway seemed endless. Finally, they reached the door. The lead officer pushed it open. The room beyond was empty. A single lamp illuminated a large table covered with documents, photographs, and maps. Victor was gone. Ethan entered carefully. The walls were covered with newspaper clippings stretching back decades. Articles discussed property disputes, business deals, unexplained disappearances, and construction projects throughout the district. Red strings connected various photographs. It looked like the headquarters of someone obsessed with solving a mystery. Sarah examined one section of the wall. "What is all this?" she whispered. Martin stared at a photograph of his grandfather. Nearby was a photograph of the missing business partner. More photographs showed city officials, developers, and investors from different generations. The pattern slowly became clear. Someone had spent years tracking connections between these people. Daniel stepped closer to a stack of notebooks. His expression changed immediately. "I've seen these before." Ethan looked at him. "Where?" Daniel picked up one notebook. Victor carried one everywhere. He never let anyone touch it. Inside were hundreds of handwritten notes. Most described research into the history of the district. Others detailed meetings between influential businessmen. Some entries contained names that appeared repeatedly over several decades. The same families, the same companies, the same properties. Again and again. Then Ethan found something shocking. A recent entry described the Copper Room. Victor had written extensively about the restaurant, but not as part of a sabotage plan. Instead, he described it as the key to uncovering a hidden truth. The discovery confused Ethan. Why would Victor destroy the restaurant if he believed it was important? Nothing made sense. Then Sarah found a recording device on the table. A small red light blinked steadily. The device was active. The lead officer pressed play. Victor's voice filled the room. "If you are hearing this, then you found my office. That means events have moved faster than I expected. You probably believe I sabotaged the restaurant for money. Daniel certainly thinks so. The truth is far more complicated." Everyone exchanged uneasy glances. The recording continued. "Months ago, I discovered the tunnels beneath the Copper Room. At first, I thought they were part of an old smuggling network. Then I found the archive. Then I found the hidden office. Everything changed after that." Victor paused briefly. The missing business partner never disappeared. The room became perfectly silent. Martin stared at the speaker. Victor's voice continued. "He was murdered." Sarah covered her mouth. Daniel looked stunned. The recording went on. The evidence was hidden beneath the city for decades. The business partner discovered corruption involving powerful individuals. He intended to expose them. Before he could do so, he vanished. Officially, he disappeared. Unofficially, he was silenced. Ethan felt chills spread through his body. The mystery had suddenly become much darker. Victor continued. "I spent months gathering evidence. The deeper I looked, the more dangerous things became. Certain people learned what I was doing. They approached me. They offered money. Then they offered threats." The recording crackled softly. I realized someone was still protecting the secret after all these years. Martin looked pale. The officer paused the recording. "No one touches anything," he ordered. Investigators immediately began documenting the room. Meanwhile, Ethan's attention shifted toward a map hanging on the far wall. Unlike the others, this map showed underground tunnels extending far beyond the city center. Several routes connected to locations outside town. One location was circled repeatedly, a place called Black Hollow Estate. Sarah noticed it too. What's Black Hollow Estate? Nobody knew. Daniel searched through the notebooks. After several moments, he found a reference. His eyes widened. Victor believed it was where the final evidence was hidden. Martin frowned. What evidence? Daniel turned another page. the evidence proving who ordered the murder. The room fell silent once again. Suddenly a loud noise echoed somewhere below. Everyone jumped. Another noise followed, metal scraping against metal. The officers reacted immediately. Several rushed from the room. Moments later, a shout echoed through the warehouse. Movement on the lower floor. The search resumed instantly. People ran through hallways and down staircases. Ethan followed despite Martin's protests. They reached the warehouse floor just in time to see a figure moving between stacks of crates. Flashlights swung toward the motion. The figure disappeared around a corner. Officers pursued. The chase wound through the enormous building. Every turn revealed new obstacles. Old machinery, collapsed shelves, rusting equipment. The figure moved quickly. Almost impossibly quickly. Finally, the chase reached the rear section of the warehouse. A massive loading area stood open to the rain. The figure emerged briefly into view. Everyone saw the face. It was Victor. Then he vanished again. The officers spread out. For several minutes, nobody could find him. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. Then Ethan noticed something unusual. A section of floor near the loading dock looked newer than the surrounding concrete. He approached carefully. There, a faint gap, a hidden hatch. "Ethan," Sarah called nervously, but he was already pulling it open. Beneath lay another staircase descending into darkness. A collective groan escaped the officers. More tunnels, more secrets. The search team moved downward. The underground chamber below was unlike anything they had seen before. Electric lights illuminated the area. Tables held modern equipment, computers, printers, communication devices. Someone had been operating from this location recently. Very recently. One computer remained active. Investigators quickly secured it. As they examined the equipment, Ethan noticed framed photographs hanging on one wall. The images showed the missing business partner, but these photographs were different. They appeared much newer than expected. Far newer. Impossible. The man in the pictures looked older than in the historical photographs. Decades older. Ethan stared. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Sarah noticed as well. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." The lead investigator approached. The entire room grew tense. The photograph suggested only one possibility. The missing business partner might have survived. Not only survived, he might have lived for decades after his supposed disappearance. The implication changed everything. The murder theory, the legal battle, the hidden archives, everything. Daniel shook his head repeatedly. "That's impossible." But the evidence stood before them. Then one officer called everyone over. He had accessed files stored on the computer. Thousands of documents appeared. Many related to property records. Others contained scanned letters, photographs, personal journals, and one video file. The timestamp showed it had been created only days earlier. The officer played it. An elderly man appeared on screen. His face was lined with age. His hair was white. Yet there was no mistaking the resemblance. He was the same man from the old photographs, the missing business partner. Alive, or at least recently alive. The elderly man looked directly into the camera. "If you are watching this, then the truth is finally catching up." Nobody spoke. The man continued. "My name is Samuel Whitaker. For most of the world, I disappeared many years ago. That is exactly what certain people wanted everyone to believe." Martin stared at the screen. The room felt frozen in time. Samuel explained that he had uncovered a network of corruption involving property theft and fraud. Powerful individuals manipulated ownership records. Businesses were ruined. Families lost everything. When Samuel prepared to expose them, he was warned that his life was in danger. So he vanished voluntarily. He used the tunnels to disappear. For decades, he gathered evidence while living in secrecy. The reason shocked everyone. He wanted proof strong enough to expose every person involved. Not just one, all of them. The video continued. Most of the original conspirators are gone now, but their descendants inherited the benefits of what was stolen. The corruption never truly ended. Samuel leaned closer to the camera. There is one final archive, hidden where the story began. Ethan felt a chill. The story began beneath the copper room. Samuel smiled sadly. Victor knows where it is. The video ended. Silence filled the underground chamber. Everyone processed the revelation. Victor had not simply been sabotaging the restaurant. He had been searching for the final archive, the last piece of evidence. The question remained, why destroy the restaurant in the process? Then a new discovery changed everything again. An investigator examining another computer called for attention. His face looked grim. Everyone needs to see this. The screen displayed a recently received message. The timestamp showed it had arrived less than 1 hour earlier. The sender was unknown. The message contained only a single sentence. Victor, they know too much now. Finish it tonight. No signature, no explanation, just those words. The room grew cold. Someone else was involved, someone still active, someone who knew about Victor, someone who knew about the investigation, and someone who wanted it ended before sunrise. Then the lights throughout the underground chamber suddenly went out. Complete darkness swallowed the room. A second later, a gunshot echoed through the tunnels. Then came a scream. Nobody could tell who it belonged to. The gunshot echoed through the underground chamber, and for several terrifying seconds, nobody moved. Darkness swallowed everything. People shouted from different directions. Someone knocked over a table. Metal crashed against concrete. Ethan felt Sarah grab his arm. His heart pounded so hard he could barely hear anything else. Then emergency lights flickered on. A dim red glow filled the chamber. Everyone looked around frantically. The lead investigator stood near the entrance, holding his shoulder. Blood stained his sleeve. Fortunately, the wound appeared minor. The bullet had grazed him. The officer pointed toward a side corridor. He went that way. The search resumed immediately. Officers rushed into the passage. Ethan followed despite repeated warnings to stay behind. He could not stop now. The mystery that had consumed so many lives was finally reaching its end. The corridor twisted beneath the warehouse. Fresh footprints covered the dusty floor. Whoever fired the gun was running. The chase continued through several chambers until the tunnel opened into a large underground room. Everyone froze. Victor stood in the center. He was alone. His hands were raised. His face looked exhausted. Not angry. Not dangerous. Just tired. The officers surrounded him. "Do not move." Victor nodded slowly. "I am done running." The statement surprised everyone. After months of planning, sabotage, and deception, he had simply surrendered. The lead investigator stepped forward. "Who fired the gun?" Victor looked toward the darkness behind him. "It was not me." The answer confused everyone. Then footsteps echoed from another passage. Several officers turned their weapons toward the sound. An older man emerged slowly from the shadows. Nobody recognized him immediately, but Martin suddenly gasped. The resemblance was unmistakable. The elderly stranger looked exactly like the man from the video. Samuel Whitaker. The missing business partner. The man believed dead for decades. He was alive. very much alive. The room fell silent. Samuel looked at the assembled group. His eyes settled on Martin. For a long moment neither man spoke. Then Samuel sighed. It took far too long for the truth to reach this point. Martin stared at him. You disappeared. Samuel shook his head. No, I survived. The elderly man explained everything. Many years earlier, he had uncovered evidence of widespread fraud involving several powerful businessmen. Properties were stolen through forged documents. Businesses were ruined. Families lost everything. Whenever someone asked too many questions, they faced threats. Samuel gathered proof. Before he could expose the scheme, he learned that plans were being made against him. So, he vanished voluntarily. The tunnels beneath the city became his refuge. Over the decades, he continued collecting evidence. Every new generation inherited wealth built upon corruption. Every new generation helped protect the secret. The network changed faces, but never truly disappeared. Martin listened carefully. So my grandfather was involved? Samuel remained silent for several moments. Finally, he nodded. Yes. The answer hit Martin hard. The owner of the copper room looked devastated. For years, he had admired stories about his grandfather's business success. Now he was learning a terrible truth. Part of that success had been built through dishonesty. Samuel continued. Not everyone involved was evil. Some simply looked away. Others convinced themselves that the damage was already done, but silence allowed the corruption to survive. The statement carried a lesson nobody could ignore. Doing nothing can sometimes be as harmful as doing the wrong thing. The lead investigator stepped forward. Why contact Victor? Samuel glanced toward the former head chef. Because he found the tunnels. Victor lowered his head. Samuel explained that months earlier, Victor had accidentally discovered one of the hidden chambers. The discovery led him to Samuel's evidence. At first, Victor wanted to expose everything immediately. Then powerful individuals learned what he knew. They approached him. They offered money. When money failed, they used fear. Victor became trapped between two dangerous choices. Protect the truth and risk his life, or help bury the evidence forever. Ethan frowned. Then why sabotage the restaurant? Victor looked ashamed. Because I made mistakes. His voice sounded heavy with regret. He admitted that fear had influenced his decisions. The pressure placed upon him became overwhelming. He convinced himself that destroying the restaurant would stop the investigation. He believed it would protect people he cared about. Instead, he created chaos. Customers lost trust. Employees suffered. An innocent business nearly collapsed. The consequences of his actions became impossible to ignore. I thought I was preventing something worse, Victor said quietly. I was wrong. The room remained silent. No one celebrated his confession. The damage had already been done. Then the lead investigator asked the question everyone wanted answered. Who sent the message? Victor looked toward Samuel. Samuel nodded slowly. It was someone connected to the original network. The elderly man revealed that he had spent years tracking descendants of the people involved in the corruption. Most had moved on with their lives. A few remained determined to protect the secret. One individual in particular had become increasingly desperate. A wealthy developer named Richard Graves. The name appeared throughout the archives. He had planned to acquire properties connected to the hidden fraud before the truth emerged. The copper room was one of those properties. The failed dinner service, the missing tickets, the stolen inventory, the pressure on Victor, everything connected back to the same objective: control the property before the evidence surfaced. Officers immediately began organizing a search for graves, but before they could leave, Samuel stopped them. "There is one final thing you need to see." The elderly man led the group through another tunnel. The passage ended at a heavy steel door. Unlike the others, this one looked untouched. Samuel removed a key from his pocket. His hands trembled slightly with age. The lock clicked. The door opened. Inside stood the final archive. Rows of shelves stretched across the room. Boxes filled with records covered every wall. Property deeds, financial ledgers, personal correspondence, legal documents, photographs, decades of evidence. The truth Samuel had protected for so many years finally stood exposed. Several investigators immediately began documenting everything. The archive contained enough proof to answer countless questions. More importantly, it contained enough proof to ensure that the truth could never be buried again. Samuel watched quietly as officers worked. A faint smile appeared on his face. For the first time, he seemed at peace. Hours passed. The sun slowly began rising outside. By morning, the story dominated news reports across the region. Investigators secured the archives. Arrests followed. Several individuals connected to the corruption network faced serious legal consequences. The hidden history of the district finally became public knowledge. Meanwhile, the Copper Room remained closed temporarily. Many people believed the restaurant would never recover. The damage to its reputation seemed enormous. Customers had witnessed chaos. The famous dinner service disaster had become local legend. No entrees had left the kitchen. The restaurant had nearly been destroyed. Yet something unexpected happened. As news of the investigation spread, public opinion changed. People learned that the restaurant itself had been a victim. Employees had worked under impossible circumstances. Martin had fought to save the business. Ethan and Sarah had helped uncover the truth. Support began pouring in. Customers sent messages. Local residents offered encouragement. Many promised to return when the restaurant reopened. Several weeks later, the Copper Room opened its doors once again. The atmosphere felt different. Fresh flowers decorated the dining room. The kitchen had been renovated. New systems were installed. Transparency became a core value of the business. Martin wanted the restaurant to represent honesty rather than secrecy. On reopening night, every table was fully booked. Customers arrived early. Some had followed the story from the beginning. Others simply wanted to support the restaurant. Ethan stood in the kitchen wearing a new jacket. His promotion had become official. After everything he had done, he was now a senior chef. Sarah had also received a promotion. Both had earned the respect of everyone around them. As dinner service began, Ethan looked at the first ticket of the evening. A simple order. Nothing mysterious, nothing unusual. Yet seeing it reach the cooking station felt strangely emotional. Food was prepared, plates were completed. Waiters carried entrees into the dining room. This time every dish reached its destination. Applause erupted from customers. Some employees laughed. Others wiped away tears. The restaurant had survived. Martin stood near the entrance watching the scene unfold. For a moment he thought about everything that had happened. The hidden tunnels, the secret archives, the missing tickets, the flood, the warehouse, the decades-old mystery. Most importantly, he thought about the lesson hidden beneath it all. Truth may take years to emerge, sometimes even generations, but eventually secrets have a way of finding light, and when they do, honesty becomes stronger than fear. As the evening continued, the Copper Room felt alive once more. The nightmare was finally over. The dinner service that once became a disaster had transformed into a symbol of resilience. No entrees left the kitchen on that terrible night. But in the end, the truth did, and it changed everything. Thank you for joining us on Dark Lantern Stories. If you enjoyed this mystery and stayed with us until the very end, let us know where you are watching from, your city and country in the comments below. What would you have done if you discovered those hidden tunnels beneath the restaurant? If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to Dark Lantern Stories, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next suspense-filled mystery. Until next time, keep your lantern lit, because some of the darkest secrets are hiding in plain sight.